that we can flee the wrath to come through being protected in the ark. And the ark is what? The ark is Christ. Joining me now is Dr. Andy Woods. Dr. Woods, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for being with us. Would you agree with those comments?
Yeah, of course, I agree with them, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. Hey, before we get into some topics here, on my Worldview report tonight, I'm reporting on legislation in Ireland that's going to make it a crime if you pray within so many feet. Not if you have a sign, not if you shout, not if you approach. If you just pray so many feet within an abortion clinic, you're going to be prosecuted. And they're putting out these zones on a map for the public. We add that to other laws that are coming down. Yesterday, we reported on the British gentleman, Nigel Farage, who has come out and said that he has lost his bank account. His bank account gave him so many days to get his money out. They didn't want to have him banking, even though he'd been with them for many years. He then went on to 7 other banks. They all said no. He is the one who was leading the Brexit movement. He's a conservative gentleman. Would be like, kind of like an America First type person if he lived in America, but he lives in Great Britain. So he's lost his banking, gone to 7 other banks, can't find a bank that wants him. We see in Michigan, we were talking last week about a bill in Michigan. We were the first outlets to discuss it. And that was in relation to legislation that has passed the House. It will surely pass the Senate. And it will go to this radical governor, and it will be defended by this radical attorney general in Michigan, that if you make someone feel bad, if you hurt their feelings, you can be prosecuted. You can be charged. You can be sent to re-education camps. You can be sent to prison. Today, this story that we were reporting last week is even now making the headline at the Daily Mail. And this is not a conservative publication. Let's show this guy. Here's the headline at the Daily Mail, UK. Michigan residents could be charged with a felony, face up to 5 years in prison, and get a $10,000 fine for using the wrong pronouns under, quote, unconstitutional, end quote, new bill. That's their headline. Even the, I would say, liberal Daily Mail is understanding what we were reporting on, one of the first national outlets last week to report on this, as we're even broadcasting in Michigan right now on a large VCY America station in Michigan. My question to you, Dr. Woods, is almost on a daily basis now. Oh, and by the way, I saw where 2 days ago, and we put it on our news report, worldviewreport.com, the aggregated daily news site, worldviewreport.com. By the way, folks, we put a lot of aggregated news there, stories that we don't ever have time to get to on radio or television. And sometimes they end up there a couple days before we even have time to talk about them on radio and television. Well, about 2 days ago, I put an article up there where so-called celebrities had written a letter to TikTok, to Instagram, to YouTube, Google, etc., calling for people that use the wrong pronouns or are opposed to transgender movement that they be deleted. Dr. Woods, you and I know guys like Francis Schaeffer for years warned about these kind of things. Others have warned. But folks, and Dr. Woods, it's now here. As a pastor who preaches the truth on your broadcast, joins me here on radio, as a church, as a pulpit, how concerned are you about being prosecuted for saying and teaching what's in the Bible?
Well, from a human perspective, I'm very concerned. I mean, just that last article you put up, can't hurt someone's feelings. Well, if we're going to jail people based on hurting people's feelings with speech, basically what they're saying is don't preach the gospel here, because the gospel by its very nature is designed to hurt people's feelings. It's Galatians chapter 5 verse 11 calls it, an offense, and God designed it that way. And quite frankly, the reason I'm a Christian today, is someone preached the gospel to me when I was 16, and they hurt my feelings. I mean, they talked about hell, and they told me that if I was not a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ, I would go to hell. And so, yeah, my feelings were hurt, and I didn't want to go to hell. And I certainly didn't want to believe that my loved ones were on their way to hell. But that was my whole incentive, to reach out to Christ for salvation, because my feelings got hurt. So this idea that, gosh, we're worried about hurting people's feelings. I mean, basically what they're saying is don't preach the gospel here. Don't bring in your offensive gospel. And this whole transgender thing, just blows my mind, because what they're saying is don't teach the very first chapter of God's book, where God very clearly in Genesis 1, verse 27 says he made them male and female. He didn't give them a choice as to what gender they thought they should be. It's determined by divine decree, by chromosomes, by biology. So basically that ridiculous article that you just had up there says don't preach the gospel, don't teach Genesis 1. And so when you ask me, are you concerned, that this is ultimately going to lead to the prosecution of pastors? Of course I'm concerned. And I've just tried to lay out the case why really what all of this is a pretext for the illegalizing of Christianity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. All right, let's go through our notes today. We're going to talk about Gog and Magog. We're going to talk about Kings of the East. We're going to talk about global economy. We're going to talk about the IMF working on a global central bank digital dollar. We're going to talk about Mark of the Beast technology. We're going to talk about, let's see, what else is in our list of things here? Global religion. I don't know if we're going to get to all of it, but let's start with this one right here. U.S. House of Representatives promotes special envoy role to advance Abraham Accords. Let's talk about that, please.
Yeah, well, the whole name of the game right now is to see Saudi Arabia enter into the Abraham Accords. She's the next nation to fall under the auspices of the Abraham Accords. I'm sure your audience already knows this, but just by way of review, the Abraham Accords are not peace agreements. They're not made with Israel's enemies. They're normalization agreements, and that's the learning curve you have to go through to understand the Abraham Accords. We're an Islamic nation. All they have to do is recognize Israel's existence, and then Israel will open up to that given nation what I call the 4 T's: trade, travel, tourism, and technology. And the reason why Saudi Arabia is the next nation to enter into one of these Abraham Accords, and the article talked about our own House of Representatives, wants to appoint an envoy to speed the normalization process between who? Between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The reason that's such a big deal is because of Ezekiel 38, verse 13, which indicates that when this invasion from the north that we've talked about constantly happens, spearheaded by Russia, Iran, and Turkey, the Saudis, who we think is Sheba and Dedan, won't like it. They'll speak up against it. We've kind of scratched our heads over the years wondering why the Saudis won't like the invasion. Well, now there's an explanation on the table, probably for the very first time. The Saudis won't like it because they're in the Abraham Accords. They're actually benefiting because of Israel. And so when the invasion happens, obviously if someone is coming against a country that you're enjoying the 4 T's with, you'll have an incentive to speak up. So we're literally living in a time period where, it's not just the Gog-Magog coalition coming together. It's those little tiny verses that we've had a tendency to skip over, like Ezekiel 38, verse 13, they're coming into sharp focus as well.
Indeed. Let's go to the next one. Kings of the East. Look at this Reuters article. China plans a new military training facility in Cuba, Wall Street Journal reports. Because we've dealt with this now with Gordon Chang and others. Gordon Chang, by the way, has said again that we aren't going to go to war with China. China will go after Taiwan. They will then come after us. There will be bombings. Their Chinese shock troops are in the country. That's the 1,000% spike in Chinese military-age males running over the border. And now we have this problem. So this is definitely going to happen. Kings of the East, that's discussed in the Bible. You believe that is China. And then at some point, the Euphrates dries up, which allows them to march right across on their way to Israel, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biblical entry point when talking about China. It would be the sixth trumpet judgment and the sixth golden bowl of wrath judgment. And you put both together, and I think they're describing two sides of a process. But a giant army from the east moves across the Euphrates River from the Far East into the Middle East, and they wipe out a third of the human race. And that's where to fit China in.
All right, hold right there. Wouldn't it be like the enemies of America, like China, to move against Taiwan, then move against America, as Gordon Chang is warning, and then after China, Russia, and Iran and others have taken down America, then they're free to move against Israel? What say you?
Well, I think that's a very likely scenario. And that could be why you don't see the United States of America doing anything to help Israel in the famous Gog-Magog, prediction. But China's fingerprints are everywhere, as we know. Just look at the current administration is knee-deep in corruption, being bought out by China. And what I'm trying to explain is there's a prophetic reason for that. The sixth trumpet and the sixth bowl judgment with this 200 million man army, potentially a reference to China. If that's true, we would expect to see in the end time scenario, not only Israel being regathered as a nation, not only the trend towards globalism that we see, but we would also expect to see a very, very aggressive China. And we see it. You mentioned Gordon Chang. He talks about it all the time. You mentioned here this article from the Wall Street Journal where they're building a military facility 90 miles off the coast of Florida in nearby Cuba. That reminds me of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We wouldn't tolerate that back in the early 1960s under JFK from the then Soviet Union. Why are we putting up with it now? And by the way, Brandon, whatever happened to the Monroe Doctrine, where we're not going to tolerate hostile colonization in the Western Hemisphere? And by the way, what happened to the Biden administration foreign policy, where according to that article, as late as September of last year, they were telling China that we are going to defend Taiwan against Chinese aggression. And now all of a sudden, according to that second article I gave you, Blinken goes over to China and just does an absolute 180 and plays what we used to call in basketball, matador defense, and basically says, his direct quote is right there. It says, we do not support Taiwan independence. That's what Blinken just said on Chinese soil. And think about the damage that's going to do to our country should China invade Taiwan, which to my mind is imminent. Just as Russia invaded Ukraine, China can't wait to invade Taiwan. When you consider the microchips and semiconductors and all of that kind of thing that we depend upon as Americans from Taiwan, think what that's going to do to our economy. So you have the end time scenario coming into play. No matter how you slice it, there's so many options on the table whereby exactly what the Bible predicts for the end times, is going to materialize.
Let's look at this next one. Here is, that's that article, We Don't Support the Taiwan Independence, Tony Blinken, Secretary of State. Let's move to another one. That's global currency, global economy. We see that in the Bible. And of course, we've discussed this extensively on Brandon House Live. IMF, International Monetary Fund, working on global central bank digital currency platform, which is very interesting because the IMF, of course, is such a big player. They really had the first global currency starting in 1969 with special drawing rights, as they're called. And here we are with the IMF as we looked them up a couple years ago. The third or fourth largest at the time holder of gold reserves in the world. Why is the IMF holding on to so much gold? I pontificate that it's because they know they got to back this a little bit with some hard asset to make people willing to accept it when the fiat currencies of the world burn up. So I think you'll find that interesting. By the way, last night I interviewed G. Edward Griffin for 30 minutes. For those of you interested in that, you'll remember his book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. We went into a great discussion last night. In fact, Silk texted me during it, at the end of it, said, wow, because he went into a great history of the Federal Reserve and what they're doing now and why they want to go to digital currency. So you'll find that at wvwtv.com on demand. My 30-minute interview last night with 91-year-old G. Edward Griffin. You'll find it on demand at wvwtv.com. But that's what we were talking about. Dr. Woods, this is prophetic.
Yeah, and this particular article, we talk a lot about these CBDCs that are eminent here in the United States. Well, this article points out that these CBDCs were never designed to be national. They talk over and over again in this article about what's called global interoperability. In other words, this is a currency, a digital electronic currency that's designed to transcend the nation state. I mean, the IMF, not an American organization, but a globalist organization, is behind the whole thing. And this is exactly what God said would exist in the end times, about a one world economic system that's digitized, it's cashless, and you can't participate in the global economy unless you are electronically allowed into it. And this, of course, will be ultimately where it's all headed, how the Antichrist will mark the masses and control the population, not just of the United States or China, but the global population. And here is just another example of many that we could cite of prophecies leaping off the pages of ancient scripture into potential fulfillment. And here I'm speaking of Revelation 13, verses 16 through 18.
And here's the president of France. Macron wants an invitation to the BRICS summit. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Something we've been warning about for more than a decade. Now it's everywhere. As these countries align together to bring down the petrodollar, the world reserve currency of the US dollar, which again, you think we got 26% inflation today, which is really the more accurate inflation rate, 26%, I believe. If you think we got inflation now, wait till all those dollars that are overseas are no longer needed by those countries and they come rushing back to our shores and nothing's backing our dollar. We'll get into that. Is this another reason America is not listed in the end times? It's collapsed economically. The Global Times editorial. World reserve currency seems to be going away eventually of the US dollar. This could be another reason, Dr. Woods, America is not listed in end times Bible prophecy as one of the many nations that are there, that we're not. Perhaps America has been conquered without ever firing a shot. We just collapsed within. Can you imagine, by the way, if you think we have crime now, if you think some of these stores are seeing shoplifting and having problems now, you wait until the US dollar collapses and food and things skyrocket. Can you imagine the chaos and the civil violence and unrest when checks, welfare checks, won't buy food, or food becomes scarce because that's what happens with inflation. People start buying up today what they know will be more expensive tomorrow. Supply chains break. Companies go out of business. I mean, the American people have no grasp of what I'm talking about unless they have spent a great deal of time thinking about it and studying it. What say you?
Well, what you see in prophecy is Daniel chapter 2, that statue, and of course the 2 feet, 10 toes, the feet mixed with iron and clay, the future empire of the Antichrist, which ultimately and thankfully is going to be overthrown by Jesus Christ, the stone cut without human hands. But that before that happens, you have this future kingdom of the Antichrist. Well, the feet are connected to the legs of iron, and the legs of iron would represent ancient Rome. And so we believe that these 2 feet represent sort of a global empire but it's Eurocentric in the sense that it arises out of the cultural inheritance of ancient Rome. So if all of that is true, some way, somehow, the economic power of the world, the economic prowess of the world has to be shifted from the West, here in the United States of America, ultimately to Europe. And what better way to accomplish it than this BRICS banking system, which basically will create a currency of some kind. And it's designed to remove the dollar as the lead source of currency in the world. In fact, in that article that I sent you, there's a line here that says the BRICS system exists as an emerging platform for global governance. Global governance. And here's Macron as evidence of this, the leader of France. He can't wait to get an invitation to the next BRICS meeting, which I guess is going to be, which is going to take place next month. Well, actually, we're still in June, believe it or not. Then we'll be in July. And then this BRICS banking system is supposed to take place in August, so just a little over a month away. And so is this a potential movement of the economies of the world away from the United States to Europe? I think it is. And you can demonstrate that by looking at the mindset of Macron, who can't wait to get an invitation to the next BRICS banking system meeting because he sees it as a platform for global governance.
All right, we've talked about global economy. We've talked about Kings of the East. Let's move to Mark of the Beast technology. Take a look at this article. This article here says new nano tattoos don't need batteries or wires. While it has a biosensor potential, the ink could be sprayed on almost anything. Dr. Woods?
Well, the Mark of the Beast passage, Revelation 13, 16 through 18. And by the way, let's just preface my comments by saying we don't believe this is the Mark of the Beast. We think it's, though, preparatory or paving the way to the Mark of the Beast. The Mark of the Beast system is yet future. It's not functioning yet because we don't have the beast or the Antichrist yet. But the technology is always moving us in the direction of what the Bible predicts in Revelation 13. Verses 16 through 18. But at any rate, it talks in that passage about a mark that people will receive on, not in, but on their right hand or forehead. The Greek preposition there is epi, meaning upon. It's a different preposition than uper, which means underneath. And so that's sort of been a head scratcher for a long time in the interpretive world of Bible prophecy. Because a lot of the things we've talked about, paving the way to the Mark of the Beast, microchip technology, that's talking about things that go under the skin. And yet the Bible talked about something that is on the skin. And so suddenly that whole issue gets resolved because this is actually a nano tattoo that doesn't go under the skin. It goes on the skin. By the way, there's no energy issue with this, according to the article. You don't have to recharge it. It's like an independently supplied energy source. And it's sort of like your cell phone, which once you have a Wi-Fi connection, you're connected to the whole world. Apparently, this is what this nano tattoo technology will accomplish. So this is just another example of how we're moving into the Mark of the Beast system. We're dealing with something on the skin, not under the skin. We're talking about something that is an independent source of energy, and we're talking about something that dials you into, the entire world, just like a Wi-Fi signal. And I also might throw this in. I see an entire generation of younger people. And I'm not a legalist, and I'm not down on everybody with a tattoo, but I just find it very interesting that all of the youth today have tattoos. When I was coming of age, there were tattoos that some people had, but they were never in the minority or the majority. They were always in the minority. What I'm seeing in the youth today is tattoos everywhere. Even Christians, have Christian tattoos all over their body. So we're dealing with a generation that's been desensitized to accepting things on their skin. And so all of this, put it all together, it's a stage setting, I think, for what will eventually turn into the mark of the beast.
And part of that mark will be to control the fact that we're not allowed to say what's true. We've already seen legislation in Michigan, we've cited today, that use the wrong pronoun, make a so-called sexual minority feel, hurt their feelings. You can go to jail. You can go to jail for 5 years. You can be forced to re-education camps in Michigan. You can be fined, civilly sued. We now see that Barack Hussein Obama came out in an interview, as reported by Edition.CNN, in an interview with David Axelrod, and Barack Hussein Obama said this. You want to show this, guys? He said, quote, "The need for us over time develop technologies to create watermarks or digital footprints so we know what is true and what is not true." Here's Barack Hussein Obama, who's still in the running as a potential Antichrist figure. I mean, he really is. I mean, he'd have to be on the short list. Saying, and that's if you believe the Antichrist is Gentile, not Jew, that we need to have a digital ID so we know what information was put out by who. This is what the World Economic Forum calls for. We see it in a graphic from 2018 where you won't be able to even get online. You won't be able to be online, have a business online, have a website online, have a news information website online, anything without a digital ID. This could fit right in with the mark of the beast. True or false?
It's true. And, he is concerned in this podcast with David Axelrod about misinformation or disinformation. Now, I want people to understand what they mean by disinformation. Every time you hear the word disinformation or read it, you should cross it out and write in the synonym for it, which is censorship. They do not want you to be receiving any information outside of the preordained government script or government narrative. And what Obama is saying in this particular interview with Axelrod is now finally we have the right technology that is going to enable this system to come into existence. I think the end of the article, or one of the articles that I sent you, is a statement by the well-known Canadian professor Jordan Peterson, who describes all of this as, quote, "an Orwellian nightmare unfolding in real time, courtesy of the globalist centralizers," close quote. They now have the technology in place, which, if implemented, will limit everything you see on your iPhone, everything you see on your television screen. I mean, Justin Trudeau of Canada has already moved, aggressively in this direction. It's a dictator's, wildest dreams are coming to fruition to control electronically the information that you receive. And anything outside the box, disinformation, and we're going to censor it. And you talk about the technology in place to whip the masses into doing whatever you want them to do. That's what we're descending into, very sadly, in our country and our world.
Look at this headline from Breitbart. UN unveils automated fact-checking tool to counter disinformation with big tech, Soros-funded organizations. So they go, automated. So as soon as we put up something, boom, it's blocked. Boom, it's taken down. Leo Holman was telling me last night that he has seen a drastic drop in the number of people visiting his website. He said Patrick Wood has seen the same thing. Now, these guys are getting more publicity than I think ever before, because I interview them all the time on Lindell TV, Writing House Live, VCY America, Worldview Radio. How is it they're getting less traffic now than they were a year ago? And the only thing we can assume, because these topics are bigger than ever, they're putting out articles like no one else is putting out. We believe there's already massive shadow banning and blocking going on so that people are having a harder time finding them when they search certain terms. So this is already happening. Imagine the technology that allows it to be automated with an AI So as soon as this radio show goes online, boom, it's blocked. No one can access it.
Well, welcome to the brave new world. That's why I followed up the Obama article with the article that you just mentioned, because Obama is saying the technology is here, and I think this is the technology that he's referencing, what the UN is about to unveil. And look who's behind the whole thing. You know, of all people, George Soros. I mean, talk about a man that is one of the most satanically energized people on planet Earth that I can think of. You know, if his fingerprints are involved in anything, you know it's wicked to the core, and it's his organizations that are financing this. And this is all done under the name of fighting disinformation, which is just another way of saying censorship. And so, since we're all dependent on all of these electronic devices, search engines, the time in history is rapidly emerging where what we are even able to access technologically and see and read is going to be severely limited. It's going to be filtered before it even gets to us, if it gets to us at all.
Indeed. Yeah. And then, of course, that brings us to AI Jesus. Fox News has reported this. We've actually have played the video on television of this AI Jesus that they created, and he talks to people. It's mocking Christianity. But I want to ask you when I come back, because here's the headline. AI Jesus talks dating, relationships, morals, even offers video gaming tips. It's blasphemous. But when I come back, I want to talk about the fact that Jesus himself warned of many false Christs. How could this technology fit in with what takes place in the temple? Don't go away. Jesus in the book of Matthew warned of false Christs, false messiahs. Here's Fox News. AI Jesus talks dating, relationships, morals, even offers video gaming tips. How might this AI technology and false AI Christs, plural, be used in the last days? And how could it play into our conversations we've had before? Because you and I have been pontificating now for many, many, many months that artificial intelligence, even holograms, I have referenced the holograms of some dead celebrities that are giving concerts. And I have read articles where even their own family members who are part of the estate, the trust, that has authorized these companies to develop these holograms of their deceased loved one, they have sat in the audience and watched that loved one as a hologram walk onto the stage and give a whole concert, interacting with the audience, responding to the applause of the audience. They have said in interviews I've read that even the family member says, I have to remind myself it's a hologram. It's so lifelike, you start thinking they're really alive. So combine that kind of hologram technology with AI and an image set up in the temple speaking words of blasphemy. Isn't it, again, amazing, Dr. Woods, all the things we're discussing today, all the technology, all the economic things, all the religious convergence, all the nations making military and economic alliance together, the downfall of America, who's been historically Israel's biggest defender since her founding in May of 48 again, all of these things happening. Isn't it amazing, the convergence of so many things right here, right now, and what it tells us on God's timetable?
Yeah, I mean, what did John see 2,000 years ago when he received this vision that we call the Book of Revelation on the island of Patmos at the end of the first century? I mean, one of the things he saw was the false prophet putting into the third rebuilt Jewish temple a statue, you know, just like Antiochus Epiphanes did in the intertestamental period. He set up a pagan image in the temple. But this particular statue that John saw had the ability to speak. It seemed to be alive, an animate object, and it had the ability to compel worship of the first beast. So I would just ask this question, what exactly did John see? I mean, John obviously is not going to use the words artificial intelligence. That would be outside of his vocabulary. He's just a first century man with first century knowledge. who was given the awesome task of writing down what he sees in what we call the Book of Revelation. I think there's a very strong argument to be made that John saw artificial intelligence. And what have the last couple of articles that we've dealt with on your show, Brandon, the last couple of weeks, been dealing with? We talked about an avatar, artificial intelligence leading a church service in Germany that the young people that attended it absolutely loved. Now we've got this artificial intelligence Jesus, sounds like worship to me, Jesus, very spiritual, that you, I guess, contact, summon, bring up on your screen. And this particular Jesus is open to talking about all kinds of things in your personal life, marriage, dating, career, relational issues, health issues, that you typically would go to your pastor for. But now you can go talk to this artificial intelligence Jesus concerning. Don't pray to the real Jesus, talk to this image. And by the way, the image kind of makes Jesus look like some kind of male model, makes him look like Fabio. And I don't mean to disappoint the ladies out there, but I think Jesus, when you read Isaiah 53, the true Jesus was just an average, looking guy. So I don't like all this romanticizing, with Jesus that we've seen over the years. But this, to me, is a very eerie description of what John saw in Revelation chapter 13, verse 15. I'm not being dogmatic on it, but there's an argument to be made that this type of AI leading worship of a spiritual quality, a spiritual dimension, is what John actually saw in Revelation 13, verse 15.
And now let's talk about the apostasy real quick, the final moments. Newsmax reports Texas Christian University offers drag course. Texas Christian University offered a queer art of drag course for the spring of 2023 semester.
Well, Texas Christian University, can we take the word Christian out of their name at this point? There's nothing Christian about this. And this just stuns me that this is an actual college course that mom and dad are probably shelling out tuition for, so you can learn, how to dress and drag and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, whatever happened to going to college to allow your morals, that you're learning at home to be solidified, and in the process to pick up some sort of marketable skill that you can use to support yourself throughout your journey in life. I mean, that's the traditional view of college, and you can see how this whole thing is being flipped on its head. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, and I hope the alumni of Texas Christian University will do something about this. A lot of these schools, they won't listen to the Bible, they won't listen to the Holy Spirit, but they will listen to the gospel of the checkbook, as I like to call it. Stop sending them money, and you'll get their attention really quick.
Indeed. And then here's a final one. The Supreme Court declines Christian colleges' appeal against Biden rule on transgender housing. So we'll see where that goes. Dr. Woods, andywoodsministries.org is his website, andywoodsministries.org. As always, Dr. Woods, we appreciate your being with us and your ministry to our audience and your partnership with us. Thank you so much, Dr. Woods.